Hey, one more thing before you go. Anxiety, depression, conventional and non conventional treatments. Does this sound familiar to you? How would your life changed if you had a guidebook with the coping mechanisms, the treatments, and the relief strategies that could help you through the day? Stay tuned. You're going to hear the journey of a young man who experienced severe depression, anxiety, and frustration in suffering from these types of challenges, and how he created a unique approach to managing his mental health, which might help you manage yours. I'm your host, Michael Herst. This is That Thing About the D-Day approach to depression relief. Hey, my guest in this episode is Zack Rutledge. He's an ACE certified personal trainer, a fitness nutrition specialist, and a brain health trainer educated through the Functional Aging Institute. He has a black belt in karate, and he's practiced yoga for almost a decade. He holds a Master of Arts from the American University in Washington, D.C., and is currently a clinical therapist candidate for grad school. He's also learning to be a yoga teacher and has been helping people with their mind, body, and soul for years. Zack is on a mission to help everyone fighting depression after years of struggling with depression himself, and he created the official Depression Relief Playbook with strategies and tools to help you overcome your anxiety, depression, and your suffering. Welcome to the show.
Michael, thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor.
You know, this is going to be a fantastic conversation. I think that your journey to getting to writing this book is not necessarily from a clinical perspective, but more from a personal perspective.
It's absolutely experiential for better and for worse. So it's one of those things where it was really important for me to make it count for something, making everything I went through really make it count for something. And it wasn't until COVID hit that I kind of had the idea, well, people have been reaching out to me. They knew I had been through some tough times, and people were reaching out to me. Hey, how did you get through, X, Y, and Z when you were younger? Because I'm having a really tough time with COVID. Or even before that, people were reaching out to me because they were having a tough time in grad school. And what I did was I would write emails to people, and I would explain to them some things I did and how I got through it. And I would joke that, well, one day I'm going to write a book about this. And invariably, they would lose the emails. They would forget about what we talked about. So I said, you know what? We're 6 months into COVID. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to write this book. So I did it within a month. And it's been one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done. It's been, like I said, it made it feel like everything I had gone through kind of counted for something. And it's been really, really rewarding getting the emails and the random text messages on how this book has really helped. So it's been interesting.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool journey. I mean, it's obviously you're in it for the long run because you're getting a clinical therapist certification. So you're obviously in it for the long run. Let's start at the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in New Jersey. I still live in New Jersey. It's a great place to be. I live by the beach now, so that's always nice. And I had a pretty quote unquote normal childhood. So that is to say, there were no capital T traumas, right? So my parents loved me, and we had, plenty of money. I mean, we weren't wealthy by any means, but we were fine. Everything was stable, and it was great. And it wasn't until the summer after high school, and I call it the perfect storm, where my best friend was killed. My karate school closed down, so I had lost that social kind of network there, for lack of a better term. Obviously I was leaving high school, so I lost that social interaction there, and it's tough to explain, but there tends to be this trend with people in their late teens, early 20s, where for a lot of people, they go through this internal shift. And I absolutely went through that shift. It wasn't just the experience of my friend, losing my friend. It was all at the same time where I kind of went through this shift of, it felt like all the colors kind of drained out of my world. And I keep looking up because I'm trying to visualize this and trying to put it into words. But if you haven't been through depression, it's hard to understand. But that's the best way I can put it. It's almost like everything went from color to black and white. And I didn't feel the same sense of joy anymore, no matter what I did. So, cut to now, like we were kind of saying before, the whole idea is I kind of went back and I remembered, well, what are the small things I did over the decade or so that really got me back on my feet? Because it was tough. It was a very dark time. Again, if you haven't been through depression, it can be pretty hard to understand this, but there were some real serious chemical issues going on. Yeah.
Well, and realistically, like you made comment a little bit ago, that you had everything pretty much like what most society would believe is a normal childhood, not dysfunctional. You didn't have alcoholic parents. You didn't have a broken family. You didn't have something that would, like poverty level or something that would typically put people into a depressive mode. You had a relatively normal childhood.
Absolutely. I really did. And that almost made me feel guilty because I was going through this depression and I was like, well, what the heck's wrong with me? I have the ability to go to college if I want. I didn't go through any abuse or anything like that. So I carried some guilt around that too.
Yeah, that would be kind of a unique introspect into why depression shows up, but it's also a valid, valuable point that depression could hit anybody at any time, at any age, for a multitude of reasons. They don't have to necessarily be from a dysfunctional family or an environment that you're raised in.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you had the opportunity to go to college. I know that you're in college now. Had you always wanted to go into clinical therapy? I mean, I realize that you're a trainer, and interesting enough, I want to talk more about the brain training, if you don't mind, so I can understand what that is. But what would you want to be when you grew up?
I didn't know. So I went to college right after high school, and during that tough time, and I had to drop out, and I didn't know what my major was. I was just kind of taking the core classes, and it took me a while to get back into school. I ended up in film and television because I just liked being around the people and working as a team, and I liked the creative aspects, things like that. But and this, we spoke briefly. It's fair, I think we can say that we spoke briefly before the show. And
yes.
You were in martial arts, and you know what it's like. You have this subtle drum going inside of you, and in a lot of martial arts, you kind of tap into that. And I from my martial arts, I knew there was this subtle something just kind of pushing me along, and a lot of it, and I knew if I really sat down and listened to myself, I wanted to become a therapist. But like a lot of people, the noise in my head got in the way. I had dropped out of my martial arts. I wasn't into yoga yet. And I was just kind of doing the quote unquote normal thing, just kind of chasing money, chasing a normal career. And I had all those self-doubts as well, like, oh, I'm not smart enough for this kind of thing, or whatever it is. That's not for people like me. What the heck does that even mean? So, and also I was in my 20s and I was still a little bit of a wreck, to be honest. And it wasn't until I kind of cleaned myself up and really got my head back on straight, that I was like, I need to do this. And that's, here I am, I'm almost 40 years old and I'm back in grad school.
Yeah, I went back to school at 51, so don't let that stop you.
Right on.
I think we can learn at any age, and I think that everybody should take the opportunity to jump at that chance if they have it.
Yeah, I
So,
agree.
yeah. So what was when did you first notice, or when did you first maybe were aware that you were suffering from depression of some type?
That's an interesting question because now looking back, I could see things kind of chemically popping up throughout my teens, and but when I was a teenager, at the very least, I was so wrapped up in my own world. I couldn't put my finger on what it actually was. I just thought I was a moody musician. I didn't know what was
Yeah,
going on.
I understand that. That works.
Yeah, and looking back now, it makes sense. And it wasn't again until when my best friend died. That was a pretty big catalyst. That was, I think, what unveiled it to everyone else. Now I say to everyone else because I was blaming it on the circumstances. Uh, I don't think it was necessarily just the circumstances, and it didn't take. It took me probably about another 2 years before I recognized, hey, nothing's getting better. I think this is some serious stuff going on. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we all, just for the record, everybody at some point in their life suffers depression at some point. It could be for anything like loss. And you can lose, not it could be from your job loss, it could be from the love loss,
Mhm.
from your heartache, from your parents' loss, from somebody dying, losing a pet. Everybody experiences depression at some point in time, and that's normal. It's a normal human emotion. So you step that up when like you keep saying the chemical word. There's a chemical imbalance
Yeah.
sometimes within your brain that doesn't quite work right. Can you help us understand that?
Yeah. Well, I would like to add to what you just said because while we all do go through um, depressive times, um, I would call that grief, and grief is something you have to go through.
Right.
Grief is something we all go through, and we have to. That's a mountain we all have to climb. Now, you can delay it, you can self medicate, but at some point, you have to go through um, the grief and climb the mountain. And depression, I would categorize it as something a little bit different, just because it's the inability to ever get over that mountain, if that makes sense.
And
Or once you've been through the grief, you're still there's still something else going on. Again, it's ephemeral. It's tough to put words to. But yeah, so we're all going to go through tough times. I mean, that's really the bottom line here. But um, um, depression can almost has a different flavor, and I talk about that in the book. How depression has different flavors, and I should note that as well. Now, back to your chemical question. It, one thing that's interesting is with the chemicals, um, it felt like it's a different flavor than, let's say, losing a grandparent. Okay, that most of us have gone through that very tough time. Some of us have lost parents. Absolutely a tough time. Um, but it's a different feeling than that bottomless pit. And it's that bottomless portion that, in a way, I'm glad you brought this up. And it's funny, nobody's ever asked me, nobody's ever put it like this before. But it's one of those things where if you're wondering if you have depression because you can't really find a way to phrase it, then you most likely have it. So I'm actually glad you brought that up. Yeah, because it's you if you don't identify it as grief, then most likely it's depression, and then um, um, it's time to start taking maybe some different approaches as opposed to the traditional just talk your way through it or what have you. Traditional ways of getting through grief. Yeah.
Yeah, that I brought it up for that reason in particular because we have, as we said prior to this conversation, I've got family members that have experienced depression and are currently being treated for depression in regards to that. And it took a little bit of that cognitive approach to understand that deep hole that you're talking about. and that it is not just a simple thing. It's not just, okay, well, my grandfather died, my mother died, my father died. I'm still grieving over that. Grief and depression can be one and the same, as my kids have said, can be one and the same. Or once you get to that point where you're in this hole where you don't know how to get out of it or where to go from, you need to look for solutions and answers. And I think you found some to help you manage and cope with yours, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it took a long time. Like I said, it wasn't until about that 2-year mark where I started to find things that worked. I thought I was a lost cause. When I was 18 years old, 19 years old, I thought that was it. I honestly thought there was no hope for me. And it wasn't until, strangely enough, I was playing in bands. I play bass. I was playing in bands, and the guys I was playing with were into working out. They were into lifting weights, and fitness was just something for me that was like a byproduct of martial arts. And I'd fallen out of my martial arts practice, and just because I was around these guys, like, yeah, I'll put on some muscle. Now, to put things into context, I'm 5'9", and I'm 170 pounds, and I'm a personal trainer. Now, that is to say, I'm not carrying around a lot of extra weight or unneeded weight, right? But it's nothing remarkable there, right? 5'9", 170. At the time, when I was 19 years old, 5'9", 124 pounds. So, putting on muscle
makes a significant difference.
Yeah. So putting on that muscle was sorely needed, let's say. Because if I had gotten sick, there was nowhere to go.
Right.
Yeah. So putting on that muscle was not only needed, but it was fun. And it was something that I could see. It was a physical difference I could see. Not only that, I was learning, and I was in bed, interested, reading, bodybuilding magazines, right. And that was the very first little brick. And I talk about it in the book as little bricks, like your first brick, because I don't think that there's a silver bullet. And I apologize to your viewers. We've talked about this before. My screen's going in and out. I'm at work right now, full disclosure. So I don't know what that's about. But there is no silver bullet. I like to come at it from every angle. And if something works 5%, great. Something else works 5%, great. So what I try to do is get everybody doing all of it. And obviously, you can't do all of it all at once. So we go one brick at a time. So for me, that first brick was working out. And then we just kind of built from there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you need to take it's like taking one step at a time. When I was working my way out of a wheelchair, you have to take that first step before you can take the second step, to take the third step and keep moving forward. Because if you don't take the first step, you can't. If you take the third step, as I was told, you're going to trip and fall, and then you got to start all over again. So yeah, that's an interesting approach, I think. How did you start?
And imagine.
I'm
sorry to cut you off, but imagine even just the mindset of somebody saying to you, "Okay, walk around this hospital." Well, hold on a minute here. That's a lot to wrap your head around. But if you say, walk this first step, and all you're worried about is that one step, that hyper focus, that micro goal, there we go. Because you can't walk around a building in one shot. It's one step at a time. That's just the way the universe works, right?
Absolutely. I'm sure you use that in your training, your personal training as well. Everybody's got to, everybody that comes to you has to take that first step.
And everybody that comes to me is overwhelmed and wants to lose 50 pounds in one day, or they want to do whatever it is they want to do.
Yeah. It's that instant gratification. We want that instant gratification.
Yeah. And then they get overwhelmed. And I'm like, guys, hey, let's start with doing one push-up before we worry about being able to do 100, right? So, yeah, similar.
Yeah, I used to call it when I was 5'9", and at my optimal, I was 170 pounds. But at one time, I was 190 when my wife was pregnant. I call it empathy. What do they call it? Empathy eating.
Right.
All that extra stuff I kept telling everybody was just stored muscle for later use. So that's what that was.
There you go.
But then I took the first step and went back down to 170, and we were good. It's all good. So how did you get into brain health?
So I became a personal trainer first. and I was working with other clients. And then through that, there's a little specialization in nutrition, which I got that, and that was great. And I was talking to people about nutrition, and this was just in the very beginning of COVID, meeting with people about nutrition through Zoom, because that was what I could do at the time. And we weren't talking about nutrition. These people were talking about things that were a little didn't have much to do with the quality of their food. So I said, oh, maybe they want something else here. So I stumbled across this Functional Aging Institute, who they're amazing, and they do this brain training certification. So I started with that, and I hoped that doing this brain training stuff could bring like another element of quote unquote fitness, but just overall health. I wanted to bring this overall health to these people. And this is kind of a two-part answer here. So it wasn't exactly what I was looking for, and we can get into that later. However, what I did get was I learned that your brain isn't static, and that sounds silly to say, but your brain's not static, and it's not a steady decline. You can actually rebuild your gray matter and white matter and make, increase your brain density, increase your, or have angiogenesis, which is more brain vessels or blood vessels in your brain. And you can actually make real changes, which was so exciting that, wow, I can work with people who have had, let's just say, serious concussions, or people who have had any kind of type of serious injury, or even people who had substance abuse issues, who did real damage to their brain. And I worked with a woman, just as an example, she lost her balance. We built her balance back. That's pretty cool.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So, yeah, it was pretty cool. And, and I could go on forever about it. I actually just taught a class about this. So I'll stop myself, but I will tell you this. If you want to improve your brain health, of course, I ask everyone to work on their balance, things like that. And believe it or not, start juggling. Juggling is so good for your brain, and it sounds silly, and you're going to stink at it at first. And that's okay. You get the growth out of learning how to juggle, not being able how to juggle. So start juggling, learning how to juggle. Really great for your brain. Of course, there's the eating healthy and staying hydrated and things like that. But I'll give you one more. Have you ever heard of pickleball?
Actually, no, I have not heard pickleball.
Okay.
Is there anything like
pickleball? It's like miniature tennis or giant ping pong. Okay, and it's all the rage. It's all the rage, and it is so good. Yeah, it is so good for your brain health. I mean, ping pong is very good for brain health as well. But pickleball, you're standing up and you're getting your heart rate up, which is of course good for your brain. And that coordination, pickleball. Look it up, guys.
I'm gonna have to look it up. Time. Just as long as we don't have to smack a pickle around, it'll be good.
No.
It'll be good. Yes, it will. Did something like that help with like Lewy body dementia or dementia, Alzheimer's, or anything like that?
The research is still new. Right now, the research is more on staving it off,
which is a good thing, obviously. Do you think that does that help with mental health rehabilitation from that perspective? Do you think that would help somebody through like maybe cognitively changing their depression or bipolar or anything along that line, or ADHD?
The everything is still cutting edge. So this that's my caveat, is everything is still on the edge. I'm going to say yes, experientially, yes.
Yeah, and neither one of us are doctors. Just as a disclaimer,
right.
This is just an opinion, and we're just discussing this from a perspective of theoretical and what the possibilities exist in regard to advancements within this industry. I think that would be amazing. Actually, we took care of it.
It's pretty. Yeah. Sorry to cut you off. There's a delay here. It's really exciting. And one of the secrets, and I don't want to hold you up on this because, like I said, I could talk about this forever. But one of the big components is getting your heart rate up as you work on mental exercises or as you work on coordination exercises. Is getting your heart rate up at the same time. So you're working your brain and your body at the same time, essentially, and you're getting that blood flow in there. Really cool, cutting edge stuff. All signs point to yes, but it's just like when you buy like a can of nuts that say these nuts may be good for your health. They can't say definitively because, and I'm actually taking a course in this right now. Let's just say you take a supplement like glucosamine, okay? And glucosamine may help with joints. But it sounds like a lazy answer, but it's very true. Everyone is different. So glucosamine only works for 80% of people. So they can't come out and say glucosamine works for everybody or it's definitively proven to do this because it's only going to work for 80% of people. Right. So I think it could be the same thing with this brain health stuff where it's going to work for a lot of people and they're not quite ready to come out and make a blanket statement. Yeah.
Well, I can absolutely say from my own personal journey and the fact that my listeners and viewers also know this, mind, body, and soul are 100% effective in moving you forward and achieving more than what you think you can achieve. I learned that practicing Aikido and Kung Fu. And I learned that in my journey, getting out of a wheelchair, as everybody knows, and changing my nutrition, changing my habits, and so forth. And, my just because we're talking about depression, members of my family have turned to more healthy nutrition and turned to meditation and to yoga, and it has helped them alleviate, reduce and or alleviate the medication that they're on in regard to their depression. So I wholeheartedly believe in mind, body, soul, and those cutting edge things moving forward in life, or at least
absolutely.
In this
and yeah, of course. And why not give it a shot, right? When there's no downside, why not give it a shot? At the very least, let yourself have some fun here. Because our society says fun is an optional thing, or it's superfluous. It's not.
Should be mandatory.
It's a necessity.
Yeah.
It's mandatory.
Should be mandatory.
I'm with you there.
Yeah. Time to have fun. Stop what you're doing. Do it now.
I'm with you. Yeah. I am with you.
It would be great. So, and you're in your particular journey in getting to some solutions for depression and for helping you through your journey, and in turn helping others through theirs. How did you develop the tools that you did, and can you tell us about some of the techniques and the tools basically that we can use?
Yeah, sure. Well, we talked a little bit about the fitness stuff, which was just kind of works on a lot of different levels there because we're having the fun, we're learning, we're getting our bodies in order, and that's all great. And nutrition, of course, and I won't get so much into that. I do keep it basic as far as nutrition. A modified, Mediterranean diet. Nothing crazy here. We're not paleo or anything. But like I was saying before, how everyone's a little bit different. I first ask people to get an allergy test. Because if you're causing any kind of inflammation, that may be contributing to your depression as well. It sounds crazy, but there are some doctors out there who think depression is actually one of the symptoms of inflammation. Either way, it's good to get it done.
That's an interesting concept. Not to interrupt you, but that's really an interesting concept. I mean, that's the first time that I've heard that. I'm going to explore that a little bit more myself.
Yeah, so just get it done, because even if not, you're going to get yourself feeling a little bit better because you're not going to be as inflamed, or your gut's going to be a little bit better. Another slightly more popular idea is that the depression is more directly related to gut health. And so, believe it or not, some people are actually prescribing probiotics because their gut health isn't quite in order. So if we get those bad foods out of there and we get all that good stuff like the probiotics into our gut, and I'm hitting you with a lot of kind of trivia here, but we actually create 95% of our serotonin in our gut, not in our brain. Uh, so
And that helps
getting
us
that gut
sleep.
health. Oh yeah, oh yeah. There's a myriad of benefits. So getting your gut health in order is just an important thing. Now, before I forget, another just as important thing is getting our supplements in order. Now, you may be one of the lucky few who don't need any supplements. Like I said, I'm in New Jersey, and most of us are low in vitamin D, or at least I was. I was so low in vitamin D, in fact, that I had little microscopic cracks in my neck
Wow.
because I wasn't getting enough sunlight. So I actually had to go on prescription vitamin D for a month. And now I'm just taking a regular supplement. Low vitamin D, not necessarily causation, but there's a correlation, low vitamin D, depression. Things like low levels of omega-3 fatty acids. You're going to want to grab some of those, whether it's fish oil or flaxseed oil, things like that. Again, really good for your brain health. Now, of course, this isn't, like we said, this isn't all of it, but it's some of it.
Some of it.
And if we can stack these things, if you can get the food in order, the supplements in order, the fitness in order, the meditation in order, get all these things in order first before we start heading for the quote unquote bigger guns like medication, because I am medicated, but that was the very last thing I did. And in a way, I'm happy because I sorted out all these other things first. There's a few other things that we didn't talk about that I worked on first. And then when I finally got to the end of it, I could have gone the rest of my life without the medication, but I found that was the final little step to kind of get me exactly where I wanted to be. So I don't think if I had just taken the medication, that would have really gotten me there. I think it's again, and I keep saying it, but it keeps being true. There's no silver bullet. When you come at it from all these different angles, you're overall just going to make your life a little bit better, a lot better.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, integrating a variety, it's just like mixing Eastern medicine and Western medicine. There's things in Eastern medicine that I wouldn't do. There's things in Eastern medicine I do participate in. I get acupuncture, I do herbs, I do different things to manage my rheumatoid arthritis and my health from that perspective because I believe in it. But at the same time, I also know that I need Western medicine to help me over certain factors that affect my inflammation as well. So it's a combination of both the holistic or Asian. I mean, it's like it being in it. Like I told you before, I have a master's degree in interdisciplinary studies. That was a little bit of this, 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 taking it all together, combining it into a solution or an answer right in the middle, utilizing all these other disciplines and what belongs to them. It's kind of the same theory that you're talking about.
Yes. Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. And we're lucky now to live in this age where we have access to all this information, and it's not taboo to be, yoga is not something for weird people sitting in a room chanting for, hippies. Whatever the yeah. I'm a yoga teacher now, and I'm not a hippie.
You're not a hippie.
Although I am wearing tie-dye right now. Yeah.
that a wee little bit of hippie. I think,
there you go.
I think we all have just a wee little bit of hippie in us. It's my sister was a hippie. I grew up, obviously I'm an advanced age. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, so I went through that little era, but I had my long hair for a little while, and then I grew up and said, I don't know what the heck I was thinking, and now I can't stand it until I get a haircut, see? So my dad would be proud if he was still here. He'd be going, I told you it's better, see? It's like, well, back to where you told me to do it, that's why.
There you go.
So in regard to the book, I know you said COVID, you had the time to sit back and write the book. I think we all had some extra time on our hands when COVID hit because it transformed what the new normal was. Do you think depression and so forth may have exploded during that time period because it made us all stop and think of what we thought was normal, maybe really wasn't normal, and then once we stopped and put the brakes on, we found a new normal?
Yeah, now I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if there was an uptick in depression or if it was just people recognizing they weren't happy because they finally had the chance to slow down. it's an interesting thing to think about. I didn't really concern myself with that too much, because either way, what the issue was, I just want to help it.
Right.
That was kind of my mission. So whether they're realizing it or it's an uptick, okay, well, there's still work to do, so I'm going to do the work, and that was just kind of how I came at it.
Well, kudos for you for writing it. You said you wrote it in a month.
I did. It was such a passion project. I wasn't expecting it to go so quickly. I wasn't expecting to write the book, but when I finally sat down to do it, it was very clear. I kept it very short. It's a short book. And I say it in the intro, there are no jokes. Every single sentence packs a punch. Nothing is in there that doesn't belong there, because I remember when I was going through depression, the last thing I wanted to do was sit down and read a book of 350 pages.
Yeah.
I want this to be this is a manual. I want this to be the manual that sits on somebody's bedstand that they're going to read before they go to bed every night or a few times a week. And that gives them that hope to move on.
And what kind of things do you have in this book? I mean, I want to help people understand what kind of tools are in the book that can help them.
Yeah. Well, I do go through, I break each chapter into, I call them actionable objectives, right? So I had, just like we talked about, I had the physical part, like the training, the supplementation, the nutrition. And then I have, and I have some stuff on brain health as well, just because I love it. Meditation. I talk about, I feel like this is important. I talked about my honest experience with medication, because when I was younger and thinking about the idea of going on medication, I was scared. I didn't know anyone else on it, or at least if I did, I probably did, but they weren't being open about it. And what I had heard was, oh, it changes your personality. You feel like a zombie, whatever. Once you're on it forever. And none of that stuff was true. So, but I do give the downsides. And I do talk about this first couple weeks, which were the hardest. And I do talk about the insomnia at night, the tiredness during the day. But I give them my honest experience in how, hey, just stick with it, guys. Your body adapts. And you're not stuck on this forever. If you ever want to come off, you just stop. And I kind of answered the questions for myself. It was like, well, what questions would I want to ask if I were really looking into this? So I put that in there. I put a section in there, believe it or not, on clothing, and that sounds silly, but I remember driving to a job interview. I was deep in depression, driving to a job interview. I just gotten out of college. And I was wearing a suit and a tie and some fancy coat and a fancy watch. And I bursted out crying on my way there. And I didn't know why. And it wasn't until, speaking of martial arts, I went back to my meditation after this interview and everything. And I was like, what am I doing? This isn't me. And that's okay. I'm not a suit and tie guy. And that's okay. So it's about finding kind of what works best for you and not being ashamed of that. Like people were always pushing me to live that kind of like American dream life of having a 9-to-5 desk job. Well, that's not me. I felt guilty about it for a while, but that's okay. So I talk about that a little bit in the book too, and how you were a police officer. That's not like a quote unquote normal job that fit your personality, and that's cool too. That's not just doing whatever normal people do, working for pharmaceutical companies or whatever. I don't know, but you followed your passion, and I feel like that's important as well. Yeah.
Well, absolutely, 100%. I mean, it takes a certain individual to be a cop. It takes a certain individual to be a paramedic, a fireman, a doctor, a nurse. I mean, I don't. Blood doesn't bother me. I've been to like a ton of accidents. I investigated deaths, but I have no desire to be a coroner. Can't figure out why they like to dig in the middle of that. But yeah, you have to find you and what works for you and what makes you happy. I think that's why. Back to what we said with COVID. I forgot what they called it, and I probably should have written this down before we come on. Where the Great Resignation, I think that's what they called it. 4.2 million people left their jobs to find something else because they just basically said, I'm not happy here, so I'm not doing it anymore.
Wild, right?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. They recognized that this is not making me happy. I don't want to be here, so I'm gone. And I grew up in an environment where, like you had said earlier, I grew up going, you have to have a job, you have to do this, you have to work 8 to 5, you have to work that, blah, 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 blah. Well, becoming a cop changed that, blew that out of the water because we worked, midnight shifts and swing shifts and day shifts, and that was a little bit different. But yeah, you go with that mentality and trying to slip out of it into something else sometimes is difficult, but 4.2 million people did it during the 2020 or 2021. Amazing.
It is amazing.
Pretty crazy.
Absolutely.
What kind of tips would you give to people to recognize if they're going through depression? I mean, we just talked a little bit about it earlier, yes, but is there anything else that you feel would stick out in your mind that people can say, hey, wait a minute, I need to stop and maybe think about getting some help or exploring my thoughts a little more?
Note, excuse me, note the happy times. So note, I'm trying to think about it, like parties or weddings. I know there's not too much of that going on right now, but if you note the happy times, or even just laughing during a joke, does it feel like, now depression is a little bit different for everybody, but for me, it felt like, yeah, part of me was laughing and part of it felt like an anchor pulling me down at the same time. Note when you cry. So when my best friend died, I had this little epiphanette, let's say, this tiny epiphany where I I realized at one point I was crying for myself and not for him. And note things like that. I wasn't crying about losing my friend. I was crying about myself being so miserable. It's like, that might be something there. So really, it's just develop that awareness to take the snapshots here and there and kind of explore those a little bit deeper. Like I said earlier, if you're wondering if you have depression, you most likely do, some form of it at least. And the nice thing is, I actually had a really nice compliment. I'm working with a few therapists who give this book to people, and they were reading it, and they were saying, "Oh, this book would be really good for anybody, not just people with depression." I was like, "Oh, thanks. That was really nice." So
That's
yeah,
good.
so at the very it was really cool. So start taking care of yourself anyway. Even if you're wondering if you do or not, well, start taking care of yourself. It's only going to help.
Well, like we said, mind, body, soul. Mind, body, soul is healthy for you no matter what state you're in. Mind, body, soul is always a good thing.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
Let's talk a little bit about where we can find your book.
Yeah. So I feel halfway guilty, but I eat my own dog food, as I say. So I've pretty much dropped off of social media, and you can email me, and that's fine. And that's pretty much the only way to get me. Now, the book is only on Amazon. I've really simplified my life, and it's only made me happier. I don't think I'm done with social media for a while, but Amazon's it, and it's just called The Official Depression Relief Playbook. And my name is Zack Rutledge, and I'm happy to take any emails. I do correspond with quite a few people, and I'm happy to give any kind of tips or any kind of insight or anything I can do to help. Like I was saying before, this is a passion project, and I feels like it's my mission at this point in my life. I'm not in this to make a bunch of money. That's what I work for money. I just want to help people with this.
That's an outstanding opportunity for you to help people with this. So thank you for writing it. Thank you for putting it out. I'll make sure that everything is in the show notes and on the website, the webpage that's dedicated to our interview right here. And I'll make sure that they've got your email contact as well, and the link to the book so that they can buy it.
Yeah, I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you.
Zack, thank you very much for sharing your journey with me. I really appreciate what you've been through and where you're at right now, and being honest and open with what you have gone through, and the fact that you had suffered from depression, but you manage it now with some fantastic tools that you helped create. So thank you.
No, thank you again.
Thanks for listening to this episode of One More Thing Before You Go, a unique conversation about life. If you like our show and want to know more, check out our website at beforeyougopodcast.com. That's beforeyougopodcast.com. Tell your story, share your expertise, contribute to the blog, and subscribe to the newsletter. You can find us as well as subscribe to the program and rate us on your favorite podcast listening platform.
And one more thing before you go. Have a nice day, have a nice week, and thanks for listening.
One More Thing Before You Go, a unique conversation about life podcast, is a creation of One More Thing Productions, established 2010, all rights reserved.